I've got some troubling news about England's royal family.
The orchestra was still playing when Catherine saw it. Resting against Camilla's gown was a small gold locket that should never have left the private royal collection. A deeply personal piece, once worn by Diana, and later sealed away, under strict family instruction. Catherine did not hesitate. Before hundreds of guests, she raised her hand, halted the Jubilee Gala, and forced the palace to confront a secret it had buried for years. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Catherine moved through the silence, with William beside her. The Jubilee Gala was a royal celebration, designed to present stability before foreign dignitaries, charity leaders, senior royals, and trusted courtiers. It mattered, because the monarchy had entered a fragile period, and one public fracture could undo months of reassurance. William had expected a controlled night. He had entered beside his wife, believing the family would smile through old wounds and leave without damage. Then the prince saw her expression change. Shock came first. Protective anger followed. He recognized the locket at once, not as a ceremonial jewel, but as something tied to his mother's private life and pain. Camilla felt the room turn before anyone spoke. She placed one hand over the gold chain and refused to remove it. The queen consort's gesture transformed discomfort into defiance, because the piece had never been approved for public display. The private royal collection was a secured group of family objects, kept apart from the crown jewels, meaning items used officially by the monarchy. Diana's locket belonged to memory, not ceremony. Catherine stopped directly in front of her. She lifted one hand toward the orchestra, and the music died. "That locket does not belong here," she said, her voice controlled enough to make the words more dangerous. Camilla did not answer. She tightened her fingers around the jewelry, while Charles watched the confrontation harden. A senior palace aide reached the king and whispered that no official authorization existed for the piece. Charles stiffened. He looked from his wife to his son, unable to defend what had appeared around her neck. Catherine knew the locket had been sealed after Diana's death, and could only have been removed by someone with privileged access. The ballroom doors closed. Guests were held inside under quiet orders. William understood the truth. This was not simply a dispute over jewelry. Someone had deliberately placed Diana's memory at the heart of the celebration. But to understand why that small locket could freeze an entire palace, the wounds carried by everyone in that room had to be uncovered. To the guests, the locket appeared to be an elegant royal heirloom. To Catherine, it represented a boundary that had been crossed. To Camilla, it symbolized a place within the monarchy she believed she had finally earned. And to William, it carried the shadow of a mother whose possessions had become inseparable from grief. In that silent ballroom, 3 different histories collided, and none of them could be separated from Diana. Catherine had spent years protecting the connection between her children and the grandmother they had never known. William had trusted her with private photographs, letters, and personal objects that belonged to Diana's family story rather than palace ceremony. That trust mattered, because George, Charlotte, and Louis would one day inherit more than titles. They would inherit memories shaped by loss, and the princess refused to let those memories become decorations for public display. Camilla saw the same locket differently. She had spent years standing beside Charles, carrying out duties, enduring criticism, and trying to prove that she belonged at the center of royal life. As queen, a title given to the monarch's wife, she believed she had earned the right to protect and represent the family's history. Yet Catherine's intervention made her feel that no crown, service, or sacrifice would ever free her from Diana's shadow. William moved closer to his wife, while the guests remained silent. Catherine touched his wrist and whispered, "It is the one from the photograph." The prince turned toward the jewelry with stunned recognition. He remembered seeing it as a child, resting in his mother's hand, while she told him that something hidden inside could not yet be shown to him. Camilla watched recognition spread across his face, and humiliation hardened into anger. She believed Catherine had challenged her authority before foreign guests, courtiers, and senior royals. The queen consort kept one hand over the locket, as though surrendering it would mean surrendering her place. Catherine felt something equally fierce. She had been assured that Diana's most intimate belongings would never be used in ceremony, and that promise had now been broken. Charles recognized the piece too. The king looked at it once, then turned away from his son. His silence carried more weight than denial. William saw the movement and understood that his father knew something about the locket's removal, even if he was not ready to admit it. Princess Anne stepped close to her nephew and quietly warned him not to speak until they knew who had authorized the release. She watched William force his anger down, then turned toward Charles with suspicion. Catherine's certainty now raised the most dangerous question of all. How had she known the locket was forbidden, and what promise had been made behind closed doors? The answer lay inside a private room at Windsor, where one warning had been ignored, and one decision had set this confrontation in motion. The gala did not truly begin that evening. Its first spark was lit months earlier, during a private inventory at Windsor Castle, when Catherine was shown a velvet case, marked with a handwritten restriction. Inside rested Diana's locket, untouched for decades. The instruction was unmistakable. It was not to be worn by any future queen. Yet one conversation after that discovery transformed the piece from a protected memory into a symbol of rivalry, and made the Jubilee confrontation almost inevitable. Catherine had entered the inventory room beside William to review which of Diana's personal jewels would one day pass to George, Charlotte, and Louis. That process mattered because these objects were not simply valuable. They carried family memories that the prince wanted protected from public ceremony. Crown property meant items officially owned or used by the monarchy. But the locket had been classified as Diana's private possession and stored separately. William watched as the velvet case was opened. He recognized the shape before Catherine lifted the lid fully, and the memory struck him harder than he expected. The future king had seen the locket in childhood, but he had never known why it had been sealed away. Catherine noticed his silence and understood that the review had become deeply personal. Camilla entered later with a request. She asked whether the piece could be worn at the Jubilee celebration as a gesture of continuity between the past and the present. The queen consort spoke calmly, but her meaning was clear. She wanted the locket to confirm that she was no longer standing outside Diana's legacy. Catherine closed the case. She slid it away and said, "This was Diana's final boundary. We will honor it." She then explained that a handwritten instruction barred any future queen from wearing it ceremonially. Camilla heard something harsher than a family restriction. She heard proof that years beside Charles had still not earned her full acceptance. Camilla's expression tightened. "History cannot remain locked in a box simply because it makes you uncomfortable," she replied. The words disturbed Catherine because they turned grief into a challenge. William said nothing, but he saw that neither woman would forget the exchange. Princess Anne later reviewed the access log, a security record showing who entered restricted royal storage. She found that someone had opened the cabinet after the inventory using authorization linked to Charles's household. Anne did not confront the king immediately. She needed to know whether he had approved the entry or whether someone had used his authority without permission. Catherine remembered every detail when she saw the locket at the gala. The refusal at Windsor had not been misunderstood. It had been deliberately overturned. Now that boundary had been broken in public, she was no longer willing to protect Camilla from the consequences of crossing it. The music had stopped, but the real confrontation was only beginning. Catherine stood a few feet from Camilla as the queen refused to release the locket from her hand. William moved beside his wife. Charles remained between loyalty and fear. Then Catherine delivered an ultimatum no one expected to hear inside a royal gala. Remove Diana's locket immediately, or she would reveal why it had been forbidden in the first place. Palace staff closed the main ballroom doors and asked the orchestra and guests to remain where they were. Senior royals gathered near the raised platform, and the silence became almost unbearable. The court was the inner circle surrounding the monarch during official royal occasions, and every person within it understood that this dispute could no longer be dismissed as a private misunderstanding. Catherine refused to move the discussion elsewhere. She wanted Charles, William, Camilla, and Princess Anne present, so no one could later soften the truth or change what had been said. The princess had seen palace conflicts rewritten before. This time, she would leave no room for denial. Camilla tightened her grip on the locket. She told Catherine that no one had the authority to interrupt a royal celebration or dictate what the queen could wear. The words landed like a challenge. She believed rank should end the argument. Catherine believed Diana's final wish stood above rank. William stepped forward before his wife could answer. He told Camilla the dispute was not about ceremonial power, but about his mother's clear instruction. The prince spoke with controlled grief, forcing Charles to face the pain his son had carried for years. The king looked toward him, but no defense came. Catherine then revealed the secret hidden inside the jewelry. The locket had once contained a miniature photograph and a folded message placed there by Diana shortly before her death. That message explained why the piece was never to be worn by another queen. Camilla's anger suddenly changed. She admitted she had opened the locket before the gala, but insisted it had been empty when it reached her. The queen consort's statement shifted the danger completely. Someone had removed Diana's message before placing the jewelry in her hands. Charles reached toward the chain, then stopped when Camilla turned to him. "Were you the one who authorized this?" she asked. The monarch could not answer. Catherine held out her hand. After several painful seconds, Camilla unfastened the chain and placed the locket into her palm. "Then show them what you believe I have taken," she said. The locket had been recovered, but its missing contents had exposed a deeper act of betrayal. Now every person in that room feared the authority behind its removal might lead directly to the king. Royal objects do not simply disappear from locked collections. Every cabinet has a key. Every restricted room has an access record. Every release requires authority. As aides searched the palace system, one fact emerged with brutal clarity. The locket had left Windsor under an order carrying the king's private clearance. But when the authorization was placed before Charles, his reaction revealed that a royal signature could be genuine while the decision behind it was not. The keeper of the royal collection entered with the access record showing that the cabinet had been opened 3 days before the Jubilee Gala. The keeper was the official responsible for protecting important royal objects and tracking who handled them. That record mattered because it could prove whether Diana's locket had been removed through proper authority or taken through manipulation. William placed the release form in front of his father and waited. Charles read the final line twice. The document carried his private authorization code, making the removal appear to be a direct command from the monarch. Yet the king's face changed before he set down his pen. "That entry was added after I signed," he said quietly. Camilla felt the protection around her collapse. She had expected Charles to explain the request or defend her judgment. Instead, he confirmed that he had approved only a broader list of jewelry, not Diana's locket itself. The queen consort looked at him in disbelief, knowing his answer placed the entire burden back on her. William did not soften his question. He asked whether his father had knowingly allowed the piece to be worn. The prince needed the truth because this was no longer about palace procedure. It was about whether Charles had chosen his wife's wishes over Diana's final boundary. Charles answered that he had never seen the locket's archive number on the original request. An archive number was the unique reference used to identify an object inside the royal collection. A senior aide had inserted that number after the king reviewed and signed the list, turning a genuine approval into cover for a decision he had never made. Camilla then admitted she had personally requested a private historic jewel for the gala. She insisted her household had assured her that proper permission had been secured. But Charles removed his glasses, placed the record on the table, and told her, "You knew enough to ask where it came from." Catherine ended the argument with one decision. She ordered the gala suspended until Diana's missing message was recovered. Anne began tracing the aide who altered the request, while Camilla realized the first consequences would not fall on a faceless courtier. They would fall on her. The ballroom doors finally opened, but the celebration did not resume. Camilla was escorted away without the locket and without the ceremonial role she had expected to perform that evening. No announcement was made to the guests. None was needed. Every eye followed her departure. For the first time since becoming queen, she walked through a royal gathering not as the center of authority, but as the person whose judgment had brought the monarchy to a halt. Charles cancelled the formal Jubilee address and ordered the household to end the evening under the explanation of an urgent family matter. The address was the king's planned public speech, marking the celebration, and abandoning it signaled that the crisis had become too serious to hide. Courtiers began guiding guests away, while the monarch remained behind, trapped between duty and private failure. Catherine held the locket with both hands, as William instructed that it be moved to a secure room under joint family supervision. That meant no single household could access it alone. The decision mattered because trust had collapsed, and the prince would no longer allow Diana's possessions to pass through palace channels without direct oversight. Camilla confronted Charles before leaving. She told him that he had allowed Catherine and William to strip her of dignity before the entire court. The queen consort's voice remained controlled, but the pain beneath it was unmistakable. She had spent years trying to prove she belonged, only to be sent away beneath the gaze of people she believed had finally accepted her. Charles did not offer the defense she wanted. The king told her that refusing to remove the locket immediately had turned a private mistake into a public crisis. His words landed with brutal force. Camilla had expected anger toward the aide, perhaps even sympathy. Instead, she heard judgment from the one person whose loyalty she had never doubted. Princess Anne found the next crack through a documented review of palace messages. The aide who altered the jewelry request had exchanged private communications with one of Camilla's senior household advisors. Anne also received a written assessment from the palace jeweler, confirming that the locket's inner frame had recently been opened with a fine instrument. Someone had deliberately removed what Diana placed inside. Camilla entered a side chamber alone, removed her gloves, and sat without speaking. She stared at the empty place where the jewelry had rested, as though the missing weight had exposed everything she had tried to conceal. Before leaving, Camilla turned to Charles and asked, "Are you coming with me?" He did not move. The door closed between them. That silence left her isolated. Elsewhere, William told Catherine he had remembered what Diana once said was hidden inside the locket, and the truth was about to change everything. Away from the aides, the guards, and the weight of royal titles, William and Catherine sat alone with the locket between them. For years, he had carried only fragments of the memory. Diana closing the gold case, holding it against her heart, and promising that one day he would understand. Now, with the interior message missing, the prince finally remembered the words his mother had used, and why she never wanted another queen to wear it. William spoke slowly, as though each sentence had to pass through years of grief before reaching the room. He remembered Diana saying the folded note was meant for her sons. It explained which private belongings must never be absorbed into the institution that had caused her pain. The institution meant the royal system itself, the offices, traditions, and households that could turn personal memories into official property. Catherine listened without interrupting. She told him she had not stopped the gala to attack Charles or humiliate Camilla. She had acted because a promise had been broken, and because silence would have made that betrayal permanent. The princess feared the confrontation might damage her relationship with the king, yet she refused to apologize for protecting Diana's boundary. William admitted something harder. He felt guilty that his mother's possessions had repeatedly become weapons in battles she never lived to control. The future king had wanted those objects to comfort his children, not divide his family. Catherine reached for his hand and reminded him that the locket had not created the conflict. The choice to ignore its meaning had done that. Princess Anne entered only after their private conversation ended. She carried a documented recovery report confirming that the missing note had been found inside the altered request file belonging to one of Camilla's household advisors. Anne explained that the folded message had been removed before the locket reached the queen consort, proving someone had tried to separate Diana's words from the object they protected. Camilla later asked to speak with Catherine alone. She admitted she had not ordered the note removed, but acknowledged that she knowingly wore the locket, despite understanding the restriction. The queen removed her royal insignia pin, a small badge marking her official position, and placed it on the table. "I wanted history to accept me," she said. "Instead, I tried to force it." Catherine did not demand her removal from royal life. She offered one path forward. Camilla must publicly accept responsibility and return every disputed personal item to the family trust created for William and Harry. A family trust was a protected legal arrangement used to hold possessions for specific relatives. The admission changed the battle from punishment to accountability. But beyond the palace gates, public fury was already rising, and the monarchy could no longer contain it. By morning, the palace silence had failed. One photograph had escaped the gala. Catherine standing with her hand extended, Camilla gripping the locket, and William positioned between them with an expression the nation instantly recognized as grief. The image appeared everywhere. It was no longer a private royal dispute. Diana's memory, Camilla's judgment, Catherine's courage, and Charles's silence had become part of a national reckoning that the palace could not control. Broadcasters interrupted morning programs to report that the Jubilee Gala had ended early after a confrontation involving Diana's private jewelry. Buckingham Palace released a brief statement, calling it an internal misunderstanding involving the royal collection. The royal collection meant the historic objects, artworks, and personal pieces held or managed for the monarchy. But the careful wording satisfied no one. Catherine became the center of an emotional divide. Many saw her as the person who had defended Diana when the palace would not. Others accused the princess of humiliating Camilla during a national celebration. William watched the argument spread and understood that public sympathy could not erase the pain behind the photograph. Charles sat in silence as commentators replayed the moment he failed to step between his wife and his son. The king folded the morning newspaper, placed it face down on the breakfast table, and looked toward Princess Anne. "Silence will now look like cowardice," he said. Anne did not disagree. She reminded him that the truth had already moved beyond palace control. A leaked summary of the recovered note then changed the debate. The documented account confirmed that Diana wanted the locket to remain within her son's direct family line and never become ceremonial property. The message made clear that the piece was meant for memory, not royal display. Camilla's position weakened further when the palace dismissed the advisor connected to the altered request. In the same statement, officials acknowledged that the queen consort knew the locket's identity before entering the gala. She had not ordered the note removed, but she had knowingly crossed the boundary it protected. Outside Kensington Palace, a crowd gathered beneath the gates holding photographs of Diana. One major newspaper appeared with the front page headline, "Catherine draws Diana's final line," above the image from the ballroom. That single page captured the public mood. Grief had become judgment. Camilla finally agreed to stand beside Catherine and William while the palace delivered its final decision. The monarchy could no longer hide behind private procedure. It needed a verdict, and that verdict would decide whether Diana's memory remained a weapon of division or became the boundary that finally restored order. The final decision did not erase the humiliation of the gala, nor did it heal every wound between Catherine and Camilla, but it ended the uncertainty. Before the senior family, Charles confirmed that Diana's locket would never again be worn as a royal ornament. It would return to her son's family trust, together with the recovered message. Camilla accepted responsibility. Catherine lowered her guard, and the monarchy finally admitted that remembrance without respect is only possession. Charles convened one final private meeting with Catherine, William, Camilla, Princess Anne, and the keeper of the royal collection. The keeper was the official responsible for protecting important royal objects and recording how they were used. This meeting mattered because the family needed more than an apology. It needed a permanent rule strong enough to prevent Diana's private belongings from becoming ceremonial symbols again. Camilla spoke first. She admitted that wearing the locket had been a grave mistake, driven by her need to prove that the past no longer held power over her place beside the king. The queen did not excuse the choice. She acknowledged that she had known the restriction and still believed her position gave her the right to cross it. William answered with restraint. He told her that acceptance could not be built by taking possession of his mother's most intimate memories. The prince could have demanded further punishment, but he chose accountability over revenge. His decision mattered because it ended the cycle of using Diana's belongings as weapons inside the family. Charles then signed a new family protocol. The protocol was a binding set of internal rules, controlling how private royal possessions would be handled. It separated Diana's personal jewelry from every crown-controlled collection, and placed the recovered note and locket into a protected trust for her sons and grandchildren. Catherine received the sealed velvet case from the king, then returned it to William. He held it for several seconds before placing it back into her hands. The future king understood what the gesture meant. She had defended a promise he had struggled to defend himself. William decided the locket would one day pass to Princess Charlotte, together with the full story of why its meaning must be protected. Camilla remained queen, but she surrendered every role in selecting, displaying, or authorizing Diana's personal jewelry for future royal events. The Jubilee Gala became the night rank finally met its limit. Camilla's mistake was believing a crown could turn another woman's private memory into public property. Catherine stopped the celebration because silence would have normalized that violation. Charles chose accountability. William found peace. Camilla accepted the boundary she had resisted. The music stopped for one evening, but Diana's memory returned to the family she loved. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.